Now let's go ahead and plot what we've learned on a timeline. We found that of all the eclipses that could conceivably have been the eclipse mentioned by Josephus, there are only two candidates remaining. The January 10th 1 BC eclipse and the December 29 1 BC eclipse. We're told that Herod died between an eclipse and Passover. That means that these shaded regions here are the possible intervals in which Herod died, between this eclipse and the Passover of 1 BC, between this eclipse and the Passover of AD 1. However, we're actually going to have to shave a little bit off of those intervals because Josephus tells us a bunch of things that happened between the eclipse and Herod's death, and a bunch of things that happened between Herod's death and Passover. Although this timeline is not 100% to scale, what we show is that if we have interpreted the data correctly, Herod must have died either right here or right here. Two very narrow bands of time. That's about as far as we're going to be able to whittle the evidence down. Herod died either very early in 1 BC or very early in AD 1. Now let's consider, are there arguments that would allow us to rule out one or the other? Andrew Steinmann, whose work I've cited several times and whose scholarship has been vital in putting together these pieces of evidence, favors this eclipse and the death of Herod in 1 BC. I think the strongest argument out there for favoring this eclipse comes again from looking at the coins. We noted that there is one surviving coin from one of Herod's sons, Antipas, dated to year 4. It's kind of a rough coin, like it was done in a hurry, or maybe it was a trial batch. We know Antipas was deposed by Emperor Caligula in AD 39. The latest coins from his reign are dated year 43. Working backwards, that would mean that he began his reign in approximately 4 BC. Steinmann, however, is of the opinion that the Herodians reckoned their reigns from the 1st of Tishri. We considered that previously. We said, okay, there are arguments in favor of the 1st of Nisan and the 1st of Tishri. Steinmann comes down in favor of the 1st of Tishri, and he says, if that is the case, if Herod Antipas is reckoning his reign from the 1st of Tishri, and he's deposed in year 43 of his reign by Emperor Caligula, that means year 1 of his reign must have begun the 1st of Tishri in 5 BC. Well, that creates a real problem for this eclipse and this interval. Because if Herod Antipas begins year 1 of his reign, the 1st of Tishri 5 BC, then year 4 of his reign, the year referenced on this coin, would end in the fall of 1 BC, right in here. If Herod the Great dies right here, then he would still be alive during the entirety of Herod Antipas's 4th year, and we already said we're pretty sure Herod's sons aren't minting coins until after Herod died. That would leave this eclipse as the last one standing. There are two problems with this approach. I'm not saying it's definitely wrong. I'm saying it's just not certain enough that we're going to overspecify the evidence and rule out this eclipse. Problem number 1, Steinmann assumes 1st of Tishri. We've already acknowledged there are decent arguments to be made for both. And in fact, we're not 100% sure when in AD 39 Caligula deposed Antipas. Caligula didn't leave Rome that year until the fall, and so it's possible that Antipas was deposed just after his 43rd year had begun. If we're using the 1st of Tishri, then just after his 43rd year began in the fall. And that would put the beginning of his reign, or rather the beginning of year 1, in the fall of 4 BC, in which case both eclipses are still in scope. However, it seems a little more likely that Caligula deposed Antipas early in the year than later. We don't have an exact date. In any event, we've already considered the Nisan versus Tishri debate and determined there's enough evidence in favor of both. We're not going to take a definite position on this issue. I'll make a comment here that will ruffle some feathers. I'm not even 100% convinced that everyone in the Herodian dynasty reckoned their reigns the same way. In fact, even Josephus himself may not have known for a given ruler whether their reign was being reckoned from Nisan or from Tishri. This might explain some of Josephus's off by 1 errors, in which case, even if Herod the Great reckoned his reign from Tishri, that doesn't necessarily mean all of his sons did. I'd like to point out a plausible scenario. I'm not saying this is what happened. It's just an intriguing scenario to describe what Antipas might have been doing. After Herod dies, Antipas and Archelaus wait until after Passover to go get Caesar's blessing on their father's will. That means there's an interval of time where they're scheming for how am I going to be king. I suggest that Antipas had strong incentive to go ahead and mint some coins then. Either he minted the coins before the trip to Rome or after. I think the case for before the trip is slightly better. First, because it would serve as valuable propaganda, as we noted in our discussion of coins earlier, and it might be good evidence to put in front of Augustus and say, look, I've even got coins minted. Second, Antipas would have had access to the royal mint in Judea before the trip to Rome, but afterwards he gets sent out to Galilee and Perea. We're not even certain there was a mint there. So I suggest the best way to explain the rough, rushed year 4 coin is that this is something that Antipas had done before his trip to Rome, early in the year, just after his father died. Well, if he's reckoning his reign from the 1st of Tishri, it won't make a difference either way. It would still make this date impossible unless Antipas is not reckoning his reign from the 1st of Tishri. Of all of the sons of Herod, Antipas is the one who appears to have gone to the greatest lengths to portray himself as an observant Jew. Whether or not the people believed him is a different matter, but he certainly made a sincere effort. Antipas would have known that the Old Testament, the Tanakh, speaks of reckoning reigns from the 1st of Nisan. Antipas then has both the opportunity and the incentive to say, I'm the observant Jew, I'm going to reckon my reign from the 1st of Nisan to make myself look good, and, light bulb moment, the 1st of Nisan has just passed right before they go to Rome. If Antipas chooses to reckon his reign from the 1st of Nisan instead of the 1st of Tishri, he can go to Caesar and say, I'm in year 5 of my reign. Archelaus over there, reckoning his reign from Tishri, is only in year 4. This might have been what Antipas did. In any event, given alternate explanations, I'm not willing to rule out this eclipse as a possibility. I think Steinmann makes a good argument for this one. It's not the only way the data can be reconstructed. The other argument out there for this eclipse is that this was a total eclipse, or this one was not. However, as John Pratt has pointed out, a partial eclipse, a mostly eclipsed moon, is more impressive than a totally eclipsed moon. And Pratt makes a decent case for this eclipse. The January 10th 1 BC eclipse was not visible until late in the evening. This is the only eclipse mentioned by Josephus anywhere in his history, suggesting it was an event that was observed by many people. The December 29th eclipse was visible within 20 minutes of sundown, right when people would have been going out of their homes to observe what they thought was going to be a normal full moon. Remember, at this time, they weren't able to calculate in advance, you're going to have an eclipse on this day. The moon rose already in eclipse, at a time when numerous people would have seen it. This would have been an impressive sight. This is more likely to be the eclipse that people remembered. So there are decent arguments for both eclipses. We're going to leave both of them in scope. We will allow that both of these shaded regions are plausible dates for Herod's death.